Welcome to the Explainer. You know, if you've been to a grocery store, a gas station, or really anywhere that sells anything lately, you know the absolute everyday reality of rising prices everywhere. I mean, we're all feeling the pinch, right? But have you ever actually stopped to notice your own behavior when those price tags go up? For some items, you probably grumble a bit, but you just toss them in your cart anyway. But for other things, the second that price ticks upward, you completely drop them, put them right back on the shelf, and walk away. So why is that? Why do we completely drop some items without hesitation but keep blindly buying others? Well, that's the central behavioral mystery we're going to solve today.
Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to picture a specific scenario. Imagine two distinct products sitting side by side on a shelf. Suddenly, each product gets hit with the exact same 10% price bump. From a pure numbers perspective, the increase is completely identical, but the human reaction to that increase? Entirely different.
Consider this wild behavioral contrast. For product A, you see a massive drop-off in buyers. People completely abandon it the moment that 10% hike hits. The demand just plummets. But for product B, zero change in sales. Buyers essentially ignore the price hike and keep buying it at the exact same rate they always have. The exact same price increase triggers a completely opposite reaction. We clearly need an economic explanation for this.
Let's start by defining market elasticity. To actually solve our consumer mystery, we need to look at a fundamental rule of economics that acts basically as our detective's magnifying glass: elasticity. In economics, elasticity is simply a measure of responsiveness. You can literally think of it like the tension of a rubber band. The pull on that rubber band is the change in price, and the stretch is how drastically the buyer's demand reacts to it. Do buyers freak out and react dramatically to a price hike, stretching that band to its absolute limit? Or do they just shrug and keep buying, leaving the band perfectly still? That level of consumer responsiveness is exactly what elasticity measures.
Let's look first at needs and the inelastic market. We're going to start at the very beginning of the mathematical spectrum, right at absolute zero, where consumer responsiveness is completely non-existent. And this brilliantly illustrates what we call perfectly inelastic demand. Right here, elasticity equals exactly zero. This is a scenario where the price tag means absolutely nothing to the buyer. No matter what that price says, whether it surges way up or drops way down, the buyer's reaction is exactly the same, which means the quantity demanded doesn't change one single bit. The rubber band does not stretch.
The absolute ultimate example of this is emergency medicine. Just imagine a life-or-death scenario where a patient needs a specific life-saving antidote. If the price of that medicine suddenly doubles overnight, the patient isn't going to say, "You know what, it's a bit pricey today, I think I'll pass." No way! They need it to survive. They will buy the exact same amount to survive, regardless of the cost. The financial pain is totally secondary to staying alive. That is elasticity at a perfect zero.
Now let's slide just a little bit up the mathematical spectrum to relatively inelastic demand. Here, the price goes up, and buyers do react, but barely. Demand drops, but only by a tiny, tiny fraction. You're starting to pull on the rubber band, sure, but the material is really thick and stubborn, so it barely moves.
Think about basic dietary staples here, stuff like rice or cooking oil. If there's a noticeable increase in the price of rice, your reaction isn't going to be huge. You might try to waste a little less food or maybe slightly reduce your portion sizes to make the bag last just a bit longer. But essentially, you keep buying it because it's a fundamental necessity of your diet. You grumble about the cost, you definitely hate paying more, but ultimately you still put it right in the cart.
Moving on to perfect balance, unitary elasticity.
We're transitioning now from the low responsiveness end of the spectrum right to the perfect tipping point, the number one. Unitary elasticity is an incredibly cool concept because it represents a perfect mirror image balance between a price change and the consumer's reaction to it.
Here, the reaction is perfectly proportional. If a company raises the price of a product by exactly 10%, the consumer demand for that product will drop by exactly 10%. It's a perfect mathematical one-to-one ratio. This sits precisely on the fence between the heavy necessities we just talked about and the totally discretionary items we're about to explore. Every bit of price pull results in the exact same amount of demand stretch.
Which brings us to wants and the elastic market.
Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens when we cross that fence and leave survival necessities behind. We enter the world of discretionary spending, which triggers highly responsive, super dramatic consumer reactions. Because you don't need these items to survive, you are incredibly sensitive to what they cost. In relatively elastic demand, a very small change in price causes a massive shift in how much people buy. The rubber band here is incredibly thin, so even a light little pull causes a huge stretch. Let's say your favorite upscale, fancy restaurant raises the price of their steak dinner by just 5%. It's a tiny hike, but for a whole lot of people, that slight increase is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Demand snaps back violently. People decide right then and there, you know what, forget it, let's just cook at home. A tiny price shift causes a massive drop in demand because, hey, there are plenty of cheaper alternatives, and going out to eat is a want, not a need.
And now we've reached the absolute, dramatic, extreme end of the spectrum, perfectly elastic demand, where elasticity equals infinity. If 0 was, I'll buy it no matter what, infinity is the absolute, unforgiving deal breaker.
This is a scenario where competition is so perfectly equal that even a microscopic price change completely destroys demand. Imagine two farmers sitting side by side at a market selling the exact same indistinguishable type of apple. If farmer A charges just one single microscopic penny more for that apple, demand instantly drops from 100% to 0. Every single buyer will immediately switch over to farmer B. There is zero brand loyalty here. In a perfectly elastic market, one wrong move and your buyers are gone forever.
Let's look at your personal elasticity.
So, we've covered a lot of macroeconomic theory today, but let's bring it all back down to your everyday life. We've mapped out this entire 0 to infinity spectrum, and what it proves is how the exact same 10% price tag change means entirely different things depending on the product itself. At 0, you buy the emergency medicine no matter what. At low elasticity, you grumble about rice prices, but you still keep buying. At 1, your reaction is a perfect mathematical mirror. At high elasticity, you quickly drop that luxury steak dinner. And at infinity, one extra penny for an identical apple means you walk away instantly.
And that brings us to our core takeaway, which beautifully summarizes everything we've explored today. Different products, different reactions. This isn't just some boring math equation, it's the complete story of human buying behavior. It explains exactly why we hold on to some items for dear life while casually tossing others aside the second the market shifts.
So what does this all mean for you? I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. I want you to literally look at your own credit card bill this month. As prices continue to shift in the world around us, examine your own spending habits. Which of your personal purchases are sitting firmly at a 0, and which of them are getting dangerously close to infinity? It's just a fascinating way to look at your own life. Thank you so much for learning with me today.